People so often try to say, look, I'm pro-Israel, but I'm also very much pro-Palestinian, and I really support the Palestinian cause. It's time that we call out this nonsense. Melanie Phillips, the journalist and author, has just penned a new piece where she basically says that the Palestinian cause, from start to finish, has been about Jew hatred. It's not been about a legitimate desire for nationalism, for human rights, for justice. If it were these things, there wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that it's just been a veneer of virtue to hide a desire to be hateful against the Jews, to prevent them from having equal rights. And I want to read to you her words, where she's basically written this new piece, and she says, the truth of the Palestinian cause, and we need to be honest about this now. We don't have time for moral ambiguity anymore. Here's what she said. The tsunami of Jew hatred that we're living through has left many in a state of stunned disbelief. It seems incredible that thousands of people in Britain and the West are parroting falsehoods about Israel that aren't only outright lies and willful distortions, such as accusing the IDF of killing journalists and hospital patients when these are actually terrorists, but are also demonstrably ridiculous, such as the claim that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, where the population has increased by 2.02% since the start of the war, according to the CIA fact book. I mean, what's so sad and shocking is there's actually a genocide that's been taking place recently in Sudan, for example, and yet there's just no international attention, hysteria there. Jews are being unambiguously targeted, as Melanie writes. She says many Jewish authors can't get published. Artists, writers and performers have said they're being frozen out of cultural life because they refuse to describe Israeli actions in Gaza as genocidal. Certainly in Britain. It's as if Britain and the West have gone through the looking glass into a nightmarish Orwellian world where the meaning of language has been reversed and lies have become unchallengeable truths. Of course, anti-Semitism is always with us, but how can so many subscribe to the same insane obsessions and blood libels which, under both Nazism and medieval Christianity, presented the Jews as driven by a lust for money and power to form a murderous and demonic conspiracy against the rest of the world? How can so many in the West have simply lost their minds like this? To anyone who's been paying attention to the Middle East over the decades, the answer is obvious. For these claims are all too familiar. They are tropes relentlessly voiced by the Palestinian Arabs, including the supposedly moderate Palestinian Authority. A few weeks ago, a Palestinian Authority official said on PATV that Jews controlled the media and so had convinced the world of the lie that atrocities were committed by Palestinians on October the 7th, 2023. In a June sermon on PATV, a popular Muslim preacher declared that Palestinian Muslims didn't want a state but wanted to kill all Jews for the sake of Allah. Jews, he ranted, always conspire against humanity. Not only against Muslims, but against humanity as a whole, and pass down their malignant and cursed genes from generation to generation. Charming. In May, a columnist wrote on the website of the official PA daily, Al Hayat Al Jadida, that the war had seen a, quote, stream of Israeli holocausts and massacres, with Israeli vampires in the government dancing the dances of death and crime while they drink the blood of Palestinian children. And they have yet to satiate their thirst. 2 months into the war, the top PA official, Jibril Rajoub, stated the Americans, Europeans and others were deceived to think that the Jew is a victim. The truth is that he is a criminal, a terrorist, and a distorted form of the fascism and Nazism of the last century. These aren't marginal statements from a few extremists. As anyone can see from the websites of Memory or Palestinian Media Watch, they pour out of Palestinian Arab society without remission deranged fear and hatred of Jews, the aim of exterminating them, define the Palestinian cause, which happens to be the signature cause of the West's progressive classes. Western liberals equate this cause with conscience and doing good in the world, even though it's the precise opposite. Such progressives, therefore, regard these poisonous tropes of Nazi-style Jew hatred as understandable and justifiable. Why then is anyone surprised that Western liberals seriously entertain the insane idea that Israeli Jews are Nazis and child-killing perpetrators of apartheid or genocide? The only proper response is to call out these Palestinian lies, but instead of regarding them as collective psychopathology, politicians and media stoke the flames of Jew hatred by themselves parroting the propaganda about Israel behaving unconscionably. Left-wing governments that ideologically support the Palestinian cause and also kowtow to Muslim constituencies in which Jew hatred is rife, shockingly recycle the lies about Israel. The worst offenders have been the governments in Britain, Australia and Canada. No surprise, therefore, that Jew hatred in those countries is now so brazen, pervasive and extreme. Alas, too many Jews are also part of this madness. They support the Palestinian Arab cause out of a misplaced sense of fairness, a craving for fashionable approval, or extreme ignorance about Jewish and Middle East history. So instead of calling out genocidal acts and fabricated claims of Palestinian Arabs, these so-called moderate Jews redouble support for a two-state solution as a response to exterminatory aggression. Jew hatred has not only been normalised, it's been rebranded as social justice, because support for Palestinianism, which seeks to write the Jews out of their country, their history, and the world, is what now passes for a moral sense among swathes of the public, the entire intelligentsia, and even, heaven help us, many Jews. Let's not hear any protests that you were once a member of Habonim or have a holiday home in Herzliya or have had to unfriend former chums on Facebook because they've callously ignored the Israeli hostages. If you support the Palestinian Arab cause today, you are facilitating deranged and murderous Jew hatred. Own it. These are the words of Melanie Phillips. She wrote these words literally just a few days ago. You know what? There's always a place for nuance. But there's also a place sometimes for moral clarity. And to be clear on things, because sometimes people don't need nuance, they need clarity. You know, I remember years ago, someone within our local Jewish community that was a figurehead had done something improper, and a rabbi in our synagogue was asked by one of their students, is this a bad person? And he said, yes, he's a bad person. And then privately afterwards, I went up to this rabbi. I said to him, Rabbi, isn't it, aren't we told to judge the action, not the person? Aren't we told to, you can't judge a person until you stand in their shoes, you've walked in their shoes for a day? He said, yes, absolutely. And I don't want to judge him. But he said, but right now, there was a moment of communal shock, of real vulnerability. And sometimes, especially for young people, it was a room full of young people, you need to just give them a sense of moral clarity in the moment. Sometimes all the kind of philosophical niceties and whatever, and just as much as you need compassion, you also need justice and din, as it's said in Hebrew in life as well, to give people that moral clarity. And there are times when diplomacy and trying to indulge or appease and understand nuance and try and get into the head of the other side makes sense, but there are other times, especially when your security and lives are at risk, where you have to be absolutely clear. And I actually think even with a nuanced look at this, just by simply observing the history of the last 100 years, you can see that the Palestinian cause has always by its leaders, by the majority support, been a cynical ploy to undermine Israel, to get rid of Israel, rather than being a genuine concern for nationalism. The basic proof being that when Arab countries controlled any of the territories, there was never a call for a nation state of Palestine. When Jordan and Egypt controlled parts of the territory between 48 to 67, no free Palestine cause. Had they won in 48 or 67, God forbid, all the Arab countries would have a little slice of the land. There'd be no Palestinian state. And if you ask most of the Palestinian leaders, and perhaps even population, would you be happy to be part of another Arab country? They wouldn't mind, as long as it's not run by Jews. It's the Jews that are the problem, because the Jewish people returning to their ancient homeland is massively threatening to their idea of Islamic domination in the world. And that really gets to the root of this. An understanding of the Jewish people's role in this world and their connection to the land. So I agree with Melanie. We need to start having moral clarity. And there's always a place for nuance. But in this case, the nuanced answer is we need to be publicly, morally clear on this.